What are the best ways that you can maximize your profit on your next renovation? So many investors are spending tens of thousands of dollars on a house for it to later not sell. Well, I have great news for you. I have some fresh new strategies on what we use before we buy our house. Plus, I'm going to share with you what is it that appraisers and buyers are looking at. Coming up. Welcome back to episode 49 of an Investor's Journey podcast. I am your host, Jonathan Barbera, and this episode is part of the series that we started on how to evaluate a property before you buy. This is something that you need to spend a lot of time on. Not many people are doing so, and they're getting into so much trouble because you are not doing the proper due diligence beforehand. You're just jumping the gun, trying to buy this property, hoping the market pulls you out. But as the market keeps shifting and correcting, and who knows what's going to happen with unemployment, you cannot build those terrible habits moving forward. So this episode, we're going to actually cover on how you can get bigger profits on your next renovation. And this matters so much. Obviously, we all want bigger profits, but not many of us are putting in the work to make sure that happens. So first off, let's start off with admitting to ourselves, right, that when it comes time to investing, we cannot be emotional. You cannot be so emotional when you are renovating a house. And I understand it's a big investment. Buying a house is a big investment, even if it's for a rental, for a flip, even if you're not using your own money, it's still a big investment. There's still a lot of risk. It's hard not to be emotional, and I understand that. But emotions, they're part of that reptilian part of your brain, that 2 million-year-old brain that always make you to do so many wrong decisions, all right? I want you to use your brain, and I want you to use the logical side of it in order to determine what the best moves are so you can maximize your profit. First thing we want to cover is the biggest thing that you are doing when you're renovating a house, whether you're going to do it to sell it or to keep it as a rental. There are two main things you're targeting at any given time. And these two things are appraised value and perceived value. All right? They're two big and very different things. And you need to understand the difference, because without either one of these, you are not going to sell for what you think you're going to sell, or you're not going to rent it for what you think you're going to rent it. So let's break those down, right? So you have appraised value. Appraised value is when you are going to refinance a rental maybe, or when you're going to sell it to an FHA or conventional buyer and the bank sends an appraiser out. This person is coming out to the property and they're doing analysis, right? They're analyzing the whole neighborhood, houses that are comparable to yours. This is why the past two videos, which I'm going to link up here, they were on running comps. And the way we run comps is the way appraisers look at comps, because that's where it matters, right? So they run comps, they look at the analysis, they look at the properties in the neighborhood that are similar to yours, and then they say, okay, apples to apples, what is yours worth? What is theirs worth? What do they have that yours doesn't, that we can adjust, and all this to come up with a value? So you need to make sure that you are doing, when you're renovating a house, even as a rental, that you can compare apples to apples to those highest comps. So when the appraiser's running those numbers, they're seeing the same thing you were seeing. All right. So make sure that you're doing that. Now, perceived value, on the other hand, is what is the value that the buyer or the renter is placing on your house. So this is equally as important, because just because your house can appraise for, let's say, 400 grand, that does not mean a buyer may be willing to spend 400 grand on your house, because maybe they look at your house for 400 and then they're thinking, yeah, but for that price, I can actually get this house that's, maybe 10 minutes away or 10 minutes further away, but it's much newer, it's much nicer, right? And it's not that far in the scheme of things when you're looking at a big price difference. So perceived value is so crucial when you're running your numbers and when you're seeing, okay, I need to make this house look good for the buyer or the tenant to want to just jump on it and be like, man, I got to get on this before somebody else does. But at the same time, I got to make sure I don't overspend, because there are certain things I'm just not going to get my money back for. So make sure you understand the difference of those two things. This is always something that I love to point out. It's Contractors are always very funny because they know how to do the job, so they feel they know how to invest. And I always say this, and it pisses them off, but knowing how to do the job is not the same as knowing what job needs to be done. That is honestly the biggest difference that there needs to be between an investor and a contractor. Just because you get a really good contractor that knows how, that does not mean they know what. That is where the analysis comes in. That is where all of this, these last two videos that we did on running comps and everything, that is where all that comes together, is knowing the how, knowing the what of how to get that done, right? Knowing what needs to go in this house, what is going to bring you the most value, what is going to get it sold quicker. So you got to understand this, and you got to understand that the biggest thing when appraisers look at houses versus when you look at houses is appraisers, they run comps. They run the value of your home based on images that they're finding of other houses listed that have sold in the market, right? So they're going through the MLS and they're looking at solds, properties that have sold, and they're going through pictures. Here's the biggest problem with pictures, though, is that pictures don't tell you if the wall is crooked. Pictures don't tell you if the cabinets are garbage. Pictures don't show a lot of defects in the house, right? But that's all the appraiser can go off of, because most of the time these houses are sold and they've been sold for a while and there's people living in it. So the appraiser can't really go and just door knock and be like, hey, I need to see your house. And nor is it really worth their time to do so. So that's what they're going at it. So you have to keep that in mind when you're looking at the property, that you got to look at pictures and be like, all right, picture wise, my house needs to look the same as theirs. Or if there's any improvement, it needs to be obvious. It needs to be an obvious improvement that they can say, yes, I can see on this picture, it looks much better than this picture because it's newer or whatever the situation may be. And we're going to cover a few of these things as we go through, but I just want you to keep that in mind. Now, that is what the appraiser does. That is not what you should do. You, as the buyer, as the initial buyer of the home, before you decide to flip it or rent it, what you need to do is walk these properties, right? So I want to share an example with you of one of a case study that we did, of a project that we did on Montana. And I'm going to link to it up here on the card. And if you're watching on YouTube, I'm going to link to it up here, and I'm also going to link to it on the show notes. So if you're listening on the podcast, check out the show notes. So Montana was, well, I mean, you're gonna see it when you watch it. It was a fun project. It was like 22 months. It was holy crap. But one thing that we noticed with that property is that we started running comparables on the property as we were getting towards the end of the project and we're about to list. And we're seeing the values, man, they're just not supporting what we need. We're looking at those values and they're low, right? I mean, houses that are being listed low. I'm talking about they were listed for like 270 and we wanted to list for 320. So we were like, oh shit, like what are we gonna do, right? We were freaking out because like that meant that we were gonna lose money on this project. And not like lose $1,000, like we were gonna lose like 20 grand. And that's not what we get into this business for. And it's not that we did I mean, it was a speculative deal, don't get me wrong, but the numbers were still there. It was just like the market, I was like, what's going on in this? So what we did with John is we got in a car and we marked all the houses that could possibly compete with ours, right? And we walked them all. And one thing that was very interesting is as we walked them, so we looked at them on the pictures and they looked great. Everything looked updated. I mean, yes, there were some touches that we did that were nicer, but again, that's perceived, right? That's not appraised. So we're like, all right, we got to go in person. We got to see what it is. Man, when we started walking these properties, crooked walls, foundation issues, walls where they have, and I have an image. I'll post it on here. but where the toilet is underneath the stairway. So you have the treads of the stairs that go pretty much over the toilet. So if you're a guy above, I think 6 feet tall, you just weren't going to be able to stand there and pee because I was standing there and John took a picture of me. And I mean, my neck had to be curled back and everything because you couldn't, I wasn't really peeing. We were just acting it out. But you couldn't fit. It was insane. And I was like, what the hell were these people thinking? I mean, this is a house, in a high end, a growing area, but it's a high end home, right? High price range for San Antonio. And they have these issues. And then we started seeing, they were using shiplap for base molding. I mean, cutting corners left and right because of the same thing. People did not do this analysis. They got into a project that they never ran their numbers on, and then they were so over budget and they just could not finish a project right. So they do what most people do. They cut corners, which is the worst thing you want to do, is cut corners on a renovation because you don't want to delay the sell and you don't want to delay the return that you can possibly get to recover some of your losses. So this project, we walked them all. We're like, all right, they suck, right? They were terrible. So we're like, what we can do is actually compare ourselves to a historic neighborhood that was a street over. Now, this was also risky, right? Because it was a street over and it was a historic neighborhood and ours wasn't. But if we do that level of renovation and we push our price up, the chances are that an appraiser is going to come in and pull comps from that neighborhood. And the adjustments they would make on our property is the fact that we just weren't historic. So they will adjust the price a little bit based on that fact alone. So we were willing to take that gamble. But the reason we were willing to take that gamble is because even when we walked that historic neighborhood, it was the same thing with those renovations. They were at a higher price point just because of the historic feature, but holy crap, were they bad renovations. I mean, just cutting corners left and right, things that didn't make sense. I mean, some things were updated, some things weren't. Like, it was just all kinds of ugly, all kinds of messed up. So we're like, all right, we have by far one of the best houses in both neighborhoods, right? So perceived value is there. Now what we got to target is appraised value, right? So we went ahead, we did the renovations, and we made sure to target the historic neighborhood. We made sure that all the little features were hitting that neighborhood. So then an appraiser has more of a shot to come in and say, yeah, this house really doesn't belong here. It belongs more on this side, so let me pull comps there. And that's precisely what happened. So the appraiser came through, he pulled comps, from that neighborhood, and our house actually sold for $350 instead of the $320 that we were thinking, right? We listed it higher, they crossed over to that neighborhood, gave us the adjustments, and our house sold for $350, and it sold in 3 days. When other houses had been on the market for 90 to 100 plus days, ours sold in 3 days. You understand? And again, it's not because we're special. It's not because we're psychic. It's because of these strategies, these tactics that I've shared in the last 2 videos, and I'm sharing with you on this one. All right? It's understanding those differences. So you want to make sure that you understand the difference between appraised value and perceived value, and you want to make sure you understand the difference between looking at a house on pictures and looking at a house in person. Pictures is appraisals, in person is buyers. So you want to make sure you know that difference. So what is it that you should be doing on a renovation that's going to not only appraise for the most, but also sell just as fast, right? Those are the things, again, those are the things that we're looking at. We want to make sure that when we put our property on the market, it sells quickly. All of our houses, when we put our rentals on the market, we usually have them rented within a week, maybe 2 tops. Like, we get them rented very quickly for exactly what we want. And the same when we sell a house. We get usually offers on our houses within 2 weeks, maybe 3. And it's usually full price or damn near close. All right. Again, we're not special. We're just implementing these tactics. And that's what you need to be doing in order to make sure you can predict your profit accordingly. So here are the things that you need to understand, that they do not bring you extra value, because this is so crucial. You can spend so much more money on these things, and A buyer and an appraiser do not care about either one, right? So you got to make sure you're not overspending on stuff that neither one of them are going to care about. So keep that in mind. And some of those things are going to be making sure, like on the Montana property, right? So this one we wanted to hit that historic feel. So what we actually did is we did the wood siding, that historic look. And again, when you check out the link, you're gonna see pictures and everything of the house. So you're gonna see what I'm talking about. But we actually did the wood siding on the front and on the right side of the house. That was the only side you really saw, because next door was a house and there was a fence and all this. So you didn't see that side. So you saw this side primarily. So we did that historic feel. And then on the other one, we used basic siding because it was so much cheaper. And because nobody's gonna care about that. When you do the siding, you do the siding like we did, and you're gonna see again, and check out the picture so you see exactly what I'm talking about. When you see how we did the front and the side, and then how we wrapped it around with the cheaper siding and painted the whole thing the same color, the majority of people did not notice it. Because when you're walking through a house and you go from the front of the house, you're walking inside, walking through the kitchen, all that, open the back door, you already forgot what the front looks like. Even if you're walking from the outside and you're looking at the house, so nice, you're looking at the driveway, the trees, a little bird flew by, then you get to the back, you're looking at the grass, the patio, you forgot what the front looks like again. So nobody notices. But if you think that it matters, now you just spent maybe 3 to 4 times more money trying to wrap the whole house in that expensive siding. And that the appraiser does not care. We learned that the hard way. We did a renovation many years ago where we put really good siding. We had to do a siding on a house, and we put really good siding because we thought it was higher, thicker, better quality siding. And when they appraised the house, they appraised it just like if we would have put garbage up for siding. And we're like, we put really good siding. And they're like, yeah, it doesn't matter. We're like, but it does. Like, if a storm comes by, this siding is going to last. And they're like, yeah, it doesn't matter. So, you know what I mean? Like, those are things that just don't matter to either one. The buyer doesn't care and the appraiser doesn't care. Another thing, cabinets. All right. This is more to any contractors out there listening. We have contractors that we're working with on some new builds, and the guys swear by like these freaking wood cabinets that he has some buddy of his make that take like, damn near 9 months for them to make it for whatever reason. So you have these wood cabinets, and I get it. They're stronger, they're sturdier, they're solid wood. Great, awesome. Nobody gives a shit. Nobody cares. The buyer does not notice the difference between those and your standard builder grade cabinets. If you get Home Depot white shaker cabinets versus those white shaker cabinets, they don't know. They don't know the difference. They don't know what's the difference between one and the other. What they do notice as a perceived value is if you have the soft closed hinges, right? So that you just grab the door and you slam it, and the door just goes fast and then stops and closes lightly. That's a little feature. That's a perceived value, not an appraised value, but it matters. But not the construction of the cabinet. That's not going to bring you any appraised value or any perceived value. Nobody gives a shit except the builder. That's the only person that seems to care about it. So don't be emotional. This is business. And this is not saying that you're giving them inferior product. Those cabinets last just as long. They're just as good. The only thing is that you're not probably going to be able to resurface them like you would a solid wood cabinet. But there's no need for that. Most people don't do those things a lot. You know what I mean? Like, most people are replacing their cabinets and stuff like that, especially when they're that old. And these new ones, they do last quite a while before any of that happens. Most of the time, they already sold the house by the time that happens. So you want to make sure that those cabinets, you're not spending 2 to 3 times more money on them, or even worse, spending 2 to 3 times more time to get those, because time is money. Especially if you're borrowing money, you have holding costs, time of market, all of that factors in, and you want to be cautious with that. Another thing, keep in mind, when you are selling a house, carpet in bedrooms is just as good. All right. Buyers do not care, nor do they notice if you have laminate versus carpeting in the bedrooms. The only people that are going to notice is those really picky buyers that hate carpeting. All right. And you do have them. Do not get me wrong. You do have them. But they're so few and far between. We've done the majority of our renovations. We put carpeting in all bedrooms. Now, if it's a really high-end renovation, we'll go ahead and run the same laminate we're running through the house into the master. And that's it. That's all we do. We run into the master, and then the other bedrooms, carpeting. And if all the bedrooms are on the second floor, from the stairs up, everything carpeting. All right? Pick a nice carpet. Pick some nice colors. Pick some nice plush carpet. Make sure it's new. Don't leave the carpet that's already there, that's a little worn out, and you got to, steam clean and it still looks used. Put something new in. They're not that expensive. And it doesn't bring you more value, and it's not more perceived value. Nothing. It's new floors or new floors. It doesn't matter what you do. The same thing with the laminate. It doesn't matter if you go with a 7mm or 12mm, or if you're going with hardwood floors. Like, flooring is flooring. They don't care. You understand? Now, in perceived value, it's going to matter a little more on the color that you're choosing and stuff like that. You want to make sure you stick with neutral, more common colors, that it's not going to make it where they have all brown furniture. Now they got to come into the house and like throw out all their furniture and buy all black ones, right? Or some funky color because you chose some weird colors on your walls and everything. Try to stick with what's trending and what's neutral colors. We have some light grays that we like to use that depending on what you put it next to, it can kind of look like it has some brown tints to it. So we like to stick with that neutralness. So in that way, it's pretty much a blank canvas that people can come and put whatever they want, and it's all going to look great. So laminate, the only time we've gone with 12mm over 7mm and or higher, 10mm, is when the floor is a little more uneven. You have a little more transition because the 12mm is thicker, so it covers better, right? So you don't notice those transitions. With us over here in Texas, we have slabs, so you tend to have that issue. So that's just more of that's saving costs, because now we don't have to re-level the whole thing or pour cement or go through this whole process. You just get a slightly thicker laminate and it'll go over, and it's just as good. So those are other things, to keep in mind, is the flooring. Then windows. A lot of people, they go to a house and they see the windows are rather somewhat new, right? In the last 20, 30 years, maybe. For Texas, that's new because then you have the single pane, old aluminum windows, right? But if these ones are a little bit newer, but they're like fogged up, right? They're really fogged and you can't really see through them. So people are like, man, I got to replace 7 windows. We're like, do you? Or do you just have to replace, 7 window panes and you don't need the full window? Maybe you don't need both panes. Maybe you just need one on each one. Now that's going to cost you drastically less than replacing each window. And that's even worse, because if you replace each window and you put brand new windows, now all the other ones look weird, right? Where all you had to do is just replace the pane, the window pane, and now they all look clean. They all look good. Yes, they don't look new, but now they don't look fogged. They don't look like you can't see through them. They're cleaner. They look nicer, right? And so that's another thing, because it's not more value. It's not going to give you more value on any side. So why spend the money on it when it's not necessary? Now, if you're in an area where all the comps have brand new windows, then that is expected, right? That is going to be expected from your buyer. So you want to make sure you do all brand new windows so you can compare to all these houses, because if not, your buyer's going to come, he's going to look at the house and they're going to be like, yeah, I love it, but this house down the street has new windows. I'd rather go to that one. And you don't want that to happen. So make sure you're paying attention to what are the new windows, and do I need new windows or just new window panes? So huge value right there. Another thing, showers. When you're running the comparables, do they all have, is a high-end area where they all have custom-made showers? Or are some of them, just more like clean showers and stuff like that, but yours doesn't look quite clean? So you're thinking, all right, well, yeah, it has tile and like the tub and all, but it's not quite clean. I gotta renovate this, right? I'm gonna have to pull this out. Did you know that if you have those little square white tiles, that you can resurface the tile and the tub? Did you know that? I mean, that I learned that here in Texas. We never did that in New York. In New York, I mean, we were contractors, right? So we weren't trying to resurface anything. We wanted to put everything new because it's nicer. Um, but here, you can actually resurface that. And if the neighborhood allows it, because maybe you look at some comparables and you're seeing some fiberglass inserts, or you're seeing some of the stuff that we're talking about just resurfaced. Now you don't have to rip out the tub. You don't have to rip out all that, maybe the plumbing, and then rip down the walls, and then re-sheetrock, and then do the tile. You don't have to do all that. All you have to do is get it cleaned up. You hire a company, they come in, they resurface. What that means is they pretty much just paint the whole thing with this special paint that's specifically for that. And they'll resurface the tile and the tub and everything. This is great for rentals as well. And for houses, we do this on houses below a certain price point in San Antonio, right? And only if the neighborhood allows it. If we're running our comparables, again, we are not being emotional about this. We are running our values every time. So if we're running our comparables and we're seeing some houses in the neighborhood, they're selling and they have the same thing, guess what? We're going to do the same thing. Why reinvent the wheel? It works. All right. So keep that in mind. You can resurface instead of replace. So we covered already some of the things that bring you no value. Well, I wanted to add to that list a little bit. So another thing that an appraiser does not care about is if you have a brand new AC unit and brand new ductwork. They don't care. If you have new electrical, they don't care. Right? These are all things that an appraiser just does not care. And they cost, if you do them all, tens of thousands of dollars, right? An AC unit for a standard home with ductwork can run you about $6,500 here, and then new electrical, rewiring, boxes, everything, switches, plugs, light fixtures, all of that can run you another $6,500. I mean, this is real cost, and it brings you no more value for the house. The same as you're doing a more expensive, fancier roof, or like we said before, the siding. Again, no value. Landscaping, no value. It gives you perceived value, but just because the landscaping is clean, right? You don't need to go crazy. I've seen people do some crazy elaborate landscaping, and I'm like, when you run the comps, it's like, why are you doing that? No other house has that. There's not much inventory in the area. So it's like people don't have much to choose from. Like, why did you just spend an extra $4,000 on landscaping? For what purpose? You understand? Unless there's a real purpose, we spent recently a lot of money on landscaping because we had trees growing over the house that they were about to fall down. It was a real hazard, right? So we had to cut them down, cut the trees, fix the lawn. We had to do all that. And, we knew it. I mean, when we got into it and everything, but those are things that you got to keep in mind. It's a lot of times just mowing the lawn, keeping the water green, especially Texas summer. It's 105 every single day, right? It burns the crap out of your lawn. So make sure you're watering your lawn, you're keeping it green, because if not, when it comes time to sell, you don't want to sell a brown yard. It's not appealing to anybody to come in and be like, oh, what the hell happened? I mean, it's curb appeal. It matters. But that's the perceived value. But it doesn't matter when it comes to appraised value. Now, what does matter when it comes to appraised value is a shed, is a covered patio. Did you know that? I didn't know that. A covered patio, right? Just you have your deck or slab or whatever you have in the backyard, and you have the cover over it. That cover brings you extra value. We bought a house, the same one that we cut all the trees down, and it had this kind of aluminum style metal cover over it. And it was fine. It was nice and sturdy, but I was like, I don't know. And we were just selling another house, and we get the comps back. We get the appraisal back from that house, and we always like looking through the appraisal because we like analyzing appraisals to see what are they comping to, what are they giving value for, and what are they not. That's where all this information is coming from. Is from actual looking at appraisals. You understand? This is not we're just pulling it out of our ass. This is actually running analysis, looking at all the appraisals for houses that we've sold, houses that we've rented. Oh, they appraised it to these houses. Oh, but look, they didn't give us value for this, but they did for that, or for this and not for that. Oh, we could have done this and that. You get what I'm saying? So that's the analysis that we do. We want facts, not opinions. So we went ahead and we we looked at it and we looked at the appraisal and we're like, holy crap, it was like, man, I want to say it was like $5,000 or $10,000 of value for the covered patio. I was like, wow. Like, it wasn't like a couple hundred, like it was thousands of dollars. That blew my mind. I was like, all right, guys, we're going to paint this. We're going to clean it, power wash it, paint it. Let's leave it beautiful because this is bringing us more money, right? And it cost me a couple extra $100 to make it look beautiful. And it's bringing me thousands of extra dollars when it comes time to appraising. Because like I said, just because a buyer's willing to pay, let's say $400, it doesn't mean it's going to appraise. So if you can add little things here and there that can help that appraisal meet your buyer or vice versa, trust me, you're never going to regret that. I hope all this is making sense and you are understanding the biggest difference between appraised value and perceived value. Because again, when you're running the comparables and before you buy a house, please do this before you buy the house. Take it serious, do the analysis. And I know you're going to tell me, because so many of you email me and you're like, yeah, but if I do all that work that you're saying that, yeah, it's so good, I lose out on all the houses. Yes, so did I. But what happened is that I got better, I got faster, and I do this same analysis to this day, and I don't lose out on houses. I can do this analysis within 15 minutes. You understand? Like, you don't need all day to do this. You just need experience. And the way you get experience is by putting in the work. All right? So please put in the work, review these videos, check out the rest of the series on this video right here, and make sure you subscribe. An Investor's Journey is here to make sure that you get the most value and achieve your dreams by doing real estate investing the right way. So get out there, crush it, and I will catch you in the next one.